I saw a couple of videos that it really disturbing me about, and it really brought to mind the real destruction of our urban core in our cities. There's been a lot of surveys that show how people are beginning to flee the cities and the like. Um, but there is and how businesses are fleeing the cities because of shoplifting and other things, which we'll show you in a bit. But these two videos themselves just show sort of a huge breakdown of what's happening in the cities. This first one I'm going to show you is in New York City, and here you go.
Hey, gordo. What's that? Yo. Yo.
Yeah, crazy, absolutely crazy. Um, it's one of the great challenges that's existed for New York in the past has been street people and the like who um, have basically end up being violent, end up making it so if you're a business along that stretch, nobody's pulling over to stop at your shop. It kind of makes the streets unsafe. And as a result, people might take pictures of it, but it certainly isn't something you'd want to post on Chamber of Commerce brochure. So and it's just so disturbing that a person is that mentally disrupted that they would end up just who knows why the guy was getting the beat down. Maybe jumped on the white SUV before that, but something definitely amiss. And when you have people who are mentally ill running the streets, and you have law enforcement that is, kind of hamstrung to do anything about it, prosecutors who don't want to prosecute. Look at you, Bragg. When you have Soros prosecutors who don't want to prosecute actual things like that, and allow them to just fester. Festering wounds don't take care of themselves. They have to be cauterized. And the only way to cauterize them is to actually start arresting and prosecuting people who are engaged in what some on the left would term minor criminal activity, but it's those minor criminal activities that fester into um, basically an unfixable infection. I'm going to show you this other video, and it's disturbing. You don't see much, but I want you to understand that an Afghan, somebody came here from Afghanistan. They were one of our interpreters, was working as a Lyft driver, lived in Alexandria, Virginia, was driving a Lyft in DC midnight a couple of nights ago, and he was shot to death. And this is a camera from an alley. You're not going to see any of the violence. You'll hear it, and then you'll see people running down the alley. So you won't actually see the violence. So I wouldn't subject you to that. Well, there you go. This is just random violence. This is just random violence on the streets. A guy who's trying to make a living in a new country, and teenagers, really young teenagers, running away after murdering this guy, and with no sense of any seeming remorse. It's heartbreaking, but it's also part of the death of a city. And this was in DC, which has had a lot of problems with violence and some of the more some of the areas that have become gentrified a little bit have now begun to become a little seedier because people won't go there as much. You know, they get restaurants, they get clubs, they get the like, and a lot of people go and they invest in, they buy houses, and the next thing you know, their homes get bullet holes in them. And they say, well, wait a second, I don't really think that's the right way. But those same people who move there are the people who elected the politicians who then attempt to make it so you can't prosecute criminals. And they elect the DAs who vote, who essentially say, I'm not prosecuting criminals. So when you get down to it, they kind of get what they deserve, but it's a sad, sad, sad commentary. I'm going to focus on a couple of things that are happening to our retail sectors, because when you end up allowing for shoplifting and property crimes, and say, well, we don't really care about property crimes. We're not going to prosecute them. We're not going to arrest you for them. When you do that, what you end up doing is you destroy the businesses that provide the jobs. Now this is from a while ago. I thought it was earlier. It was recent, but it's from a while ago. But I think it holds up. This is a North Face store outside of Chicago in Wisconsin. $30,000 of merchandise. $30,000 of merchandise stolen right there in front of you. You think that store is able to survive? You think that amount of shrinkage is something that can be survivable? This is a video from California Apple store, which Apple products. This was Black Friday this past Black Friday. Reset it. See, as the guys in the backpack.
You gotta back up, man.
Taking.
Let him go.
The Apple workers are trying to protect the customers, get the customers out of their way. That's not a lot of sales being done at that Apple.
Yo, you gotta back up, man. Yo, should we stop him? Or what? No. Let him go.
There's probably $50,000 stolen from that store on that one fine day. That store how does that store survive losing that much merchandise, that much shrinkage in one single day? This is a video put out by Chicago police from an in-store camera of a boutique, a store, a small business, independently owned. It's got a lot of high-end purses and stuff. So just to show a little peek of this. Once again, the Chicago police were looking for the people who were doing it. When I typed in shoplifting, I got like dozens and dozens of these mass shopping episodes, and truthfully, I chose a couple of them because they were more distinct and you can see what was going on. But here, this one doesn't have any sound, so you can probably say, but you see the guy going back there. He's going to open a door. You can't see the door, but it's like the back door to the boutique. woman goes, "You're not supposed to be back there." She goes to say, "Wait a second, you're not supposed to." He pushes her away. His buddy comes in from through the back door, and they come in, and you'll note they've got a lot of high-end purses. She shuts the back door. A lot of high-end purchase. This guy goes back, reopens the back door, throws stuff out, comes back in. They're going to come back in. They're going to start pulling more purses, more things off the shelves, and you've got a criminal event, and it's and that's your I mean, I really hate to be taking us through this kind of this kind of process, but I mean, we have to understand that when you allow for people, who are criminally inclined to get away with it and to know they won't be prosecuted. You have places like California, Governor Newsom's California, which says, unless a property crime's over $900, we're not prosecuting it as a felony anyway. And essentially, it's a tag and release system. When you have a catch and release system like that put in place by Soros prosecutors who won't prosecute, by Soros elected state officials who make penalties for property crimes non-existent, what you create is an incentive to become a mob violence, just massive theft. What you do is which drives up business. San Francisco has a massive problem right now. What's their problem? Nordstrom's is closing. You have stores in San Francisco, out of the San Francisco Mall. As a result, the occupancy rate in the mall is down to 55%. So what does the mall owners say? Well, the mall owner, which just lost Abercrombie, just lost Nordstrom, saying, we're not going to stick around. We're going to turn the mall over back to the people we borrowed the money from, the bank, and we're going to turn it over to the commercial lender. Why would they do that? Well, because sometimes it's cheaper to walk away from a bad investment than it is to actually lose your shirt on that investment, because that retail space is dead now. It's dead because of shoplifters. It's dead because there was absolute zero respect for the law. And quite honestly, part of the challenge is that malls are an anachronism from the 80s, and people now would prefer to shop online. And so it's part of the conversion from the brick and mortars to online shopping. But the fact of the matter is, this is a high-end retail district in San Francisco that is now going to be an empty mall. It's going to be an empty mall, and it's going to have to be converted to something else. It'll go down through a whole series of permutations where crummier and crummier retailers will end up inside, and eventually the mall will be dead. But it's on the way to death, and it is one of the two most high-end malls in San Francisco. And both of those malls are facing massive problems because of shoplifting and destruction of the property. And when you have a lot of shoplifting, you know what people don't want to do who live there? They don't want to go to the mall. It's not safe. So when you don't enforce the laws, you create environments where it's not safe. It doesn't just affect a Rite Aid or a Walgreens or places like that have shut down in San Francisco. And both Rite Aid and Walgreens have shut down their operations, or a lot of their retailers in San Francisco because of the crime rate. It affects everybody. When you can't go, you don't have a drugstore you can go to because of the shoplifting, the everyday shoplifting that exists. When you don't have a drugstore to go to, suddenly you have a problem if you're a parent. And that's what's happening. That's what is happening in our urban centers across America. It is directly because of George Soros. He is responsible. He's funded this nonsense. And quite honestly, the people vote for these prosecutors because his prosecutors have lots of money to spend on the campaign. And in local elections, they only have to get a small percentage of the people to come out and vote because nobody votes in local elections. Folks, the way to take back your town, if you're suffering from this, is to get involved in local elections and make sure your friends come out to vote in those local elections. Turn people out if you want to take back your city. But overall, on a national level, the Kamala Harris no bail team that where she was donating money to bail out criminals and looters. Well, we also have to hold those people responsible. We have to elect people who actually believe in the law, who will actually, if they want to change the law, go get elected and change it. But you cannot allow for the current system, which is gone away from the Rudy Giuliani approach in New York City, which cleaned up the city, of identifying where there are broken windows and graffiti and cleaning up areas and engaging in cleanup policies that made it so people were actually safe and you didn't have a bunch of people malingering, smoking dope and causing trouble. And he focused on that. And by focusing on that, the healing, the natural healing occurred because there suddenly was an ability to open a store in that outlet that was boarded over windows. And you had rebirth. Well, you don't get rebirth by allowing the degradation, the disintegration of a city. And we're seeing our cities across America disintegrate under the guise of social justice. And I hope you'll join me on this Friday after Independence Day to sit there to join me in supporting actually justice and not social justice, and justice for all and not just justice for some. I'm going to take a look at at what we're doing here in terms of the comments. Let's see here. What district attorney has ever said they're not prosecuting criminals? Well, Kevin, the answer to the question is you had the district attorney in San Francisco who was removed because he wasn't prosecuting criminals. That was actually what he was saying. We're not going to prosecute. We're not going to prosecute criminals who are conducting those exact kind of crimes that we took a look at in terms of shoplifting and the like. You had the social justice movement in California, which passed legislation which made it a misdemeanor to steal under $1,000 in property. So you essentially said, come steal all of our stuff to small retailers, and there's nothing we're going to do to the person who does that. So yeah, Kevin, lots of politicians are doing that, and you have a whole retinue of Soros prosecutors who have made it their business to say, we're not going to prosecute what they call low-level crimes, but they're the gateway crimes that end up destroying communities. So that's the answer to the question. Hardline law and order are needed to restore the Bill of Rights, protecting. I'm going to tell you, in terms of the martial law, I'm not big on that. I had the experience of being at the White House when Donald Trump accepted the Republican nomination and having thousands of people around the White House all dressed in black, chanting and wanting to kill us and all that. Finding my way on a bus that had to drive a 45-minute route to get literally a 5-minute walk from the White House to the Trump Hotel. Trump Hotel wasn't where my destination. My car was parked at a different hotel, and the Willard. And I was told by the DC police, the Metropolitan Police, that it wasn't safe to go the 2 blocks from the Trump Hotel to the Willard Hotel, and I had to stay at the Trump Hotel till 3 a.m. until they let us go to where my car was. But declaring martial law, I don't think is the right answer. I do think that people should have been prosecuted. I think they should be rounded up and prosecuted, those who were harassing people. We know that Senator Rand Paul was threatened and accosted. There was a Metropolitan Police officer who was with him, and the people who were accosting him and the like didn't face any repercussions. We know that the people who were doing that were encouraged by the elected officials in DC, and as a result, and quite honestly, the response was limited. In the Secret Service, they could keep you safe inside the White House, but once you're outside the White House, you're on your own, and it was an extremely dangerous situation. I've changed my behavior, my patterns as a result of that. I used to go down to DC all the time in the evening and the like, and I don't do that anymore. At the last few days of the Trump presidency, I was down when they had to have the perimeters extended around the building and all that. Remember, they burnt part of that one church, and there was a big fight because the military moved the crowds back and created a bigger perimeter so they could protect the White House better. I had the next day after that occurred, I had a TV thing I was doing with Star Parker, and her office was inside the perimeter. And so I went in there, I parked on the outside of the perimeter, I walked in, and it was getting dark, and I had to walk back out. I'm sitting there, all I could think is I could hear people chanting and stuff, was I'm a real dummy because I parked right on the perimeter, so I might not be able to get to my car. B, my car might not still be there or it could be damaged. And C, what the heck am I doing walking around potentially through a mob that hates my guts at dusk, where there's a National Guard has to be called out to stop these guys. So apart from those three things, it was pretty fun. Point being, that has been I don't suggest martial law. I think people who commit crimes, who actually commit crimes, should be held accountable. I believe they should be they should be held to the full measure of the law. And we know that there's a dual system here. And we've seen that dual system since January 6th be fully implemented. And it's as frustrating as heck. But I'm against anybody declaring martial law because, truth be told, the left is far more likely to use it to round me up than they are to round the bad guys up. So I'm not going to do that. Let's see here. It's kind of an interesting group of things here. I'm going to go. It's a lot of interesting. Apparently, today's topic attracted a lot of people who are left of center, which is always interesting. The Zach Johnson, it's the Republicans that are ruining democracy. Open your mind and eye as sheep. In other words, pull your head out of your ass. It's an interesting view into the world when you talk about the mass theft, murders on the streets, and you end up with people coming in and deciding they want to attack those who are against doing those things. I'll just address what Zach had to say. I'm sure meant with purity of heart. But Zach, we don't have a democracy. Never have had a democracy. A democracy means every single person gets to vote on every single issue. What we have is a representative government. It's called a republic. That's what we have. It is not a democracy. When a democracy would not seek to shut down speech of half of the people in the democracy, which is what the Biden administration has been doing for the past 3 years, and which the Obama administration, the ongoing behind the scenes Obama administration being run through the Justice Department, attempted to do to shut down Donald Trump in 2015 and 2016. So let's just be real about this. You want to talk democracy? Democracy isn't shutting up your enemy. It's arguing with your enemy. It's talking about your enemy. It's having a conversation, having a debate. So I'm glad you came on here, because I'm glad you were able to bring that up, because when you get down to it, what you ought to embrace is a debate. What you ought to say no to is people stealing other people's stuff and then pretending it's okay. It is not okay for people to destroy other people's businesses, other people's dreams, because they want to have a whole bunch of new coats. That's not okay. Not okay. They want to sell those coats to somebody else. That is not anything related to democracy. Democracy is a system of government that, by the way, if you want to study Athens, which was the birthplace of democracy, Athens, Greece, here's what used to happen. You'd have a demagogue who'd rise to the top, become the leader of Athens, right? And everybody would be real excited because they had all these great promises of things they were going to do. And about 6 months later, the people become disenchanted with that demagogue, and somebody else would rise up and say, "Yeah, I'm going to do better." And they take the demagogue who they lifted up to being the mantle of leadership 6 months before. They'd pick him up and they'd carry him, and yes, it was a him. They'd carry him to a top of a cliff, and they'd throw him off the cliff. And that's how they used to replace their leadership in Athens, in ancient Greece. So be careful what you wish for with democracy, and certainly if you're going to get the power, make sure you're number 2 in power, not number 1, because the number 1 guy gets thrown off the cliff. Democracy is ugly because it actually is antithetical to our basic Constitution. Our Constitution is devised, Zach, just so you know, is devised with the idea that you have majority rule, minority rights. What's more, our Constitution has amendments to it that ensure individual rights against government tyranny. And so your government, no matter if 99% of the people say, "I want this," they can change the Constitution and go through the process. But what they can't do is they can't violate individual rights laid out in the Constitution itself through the Bill of Rights and subsequent amendments that have been made. They can't do that. That's what our country's about, is majority rule, minority rights. That's why it's so frustrating when we sit there and we say, "Gee, why can't we get certain things done?" It's designed to move slow because the protection of the minority exists. It doesn't matter if the minority is left or right, the protection is the same. It's about individual liberties in this country, and individual liberties sometimes clash with the idea of democracy. Zach, if you own a vehicle and you sit there and three of you are sitting there and 2 people don't own the vehicle and 1 person doesn't own the vehicle, under a democracy of 3, those 2 could say, "Well, Zach, we're taking your car because, democracy, 2 to 1 vote, we're taking your car." That's a democracy. The American system of government says, "No, you can't, because Zach has private property rights to that car, and you can't just steal it from him because you have more votes or more power at the moment." That's our system of government and not the Democrat system of democracy. People who talk about democracy, you actually mock the concept of individual liberty, the concept of anything but the rule of the mob. And here at Americans for Limited Government, we're not Americans for no government, we're Americans for limited government. And it's built around the idea that we're going to protect individual liberties from government abuse. I don't care if the individual liberties, if people are black, white, yellow, I don't care. Individual liberties protected against government abuse. That's what we fight for. And I really would hope you'd think about it, because the fact is, this whole democracy thing is garbage. We have a republic built upon majority rule, minority rights, and individual liberties protected under the Constitution that were endowed by our Creator. That's what the American system is. That's the DNA of America. And if you want to change the soul of America, and you want to have rule by mob, power coming from the end of whoever has the gun, if you want to have that, then change the system. But if you want to actually have protection of individual liberties, you might want to take a second look at what you're looking for, because you're going down the wrong path. Sorry, didn't mean to go so far off that. Sam Abo, they want to prosecute President Trump with false information, leave free Biden and his son after they catch them with cocaine in the White House. Yeah, Sam, I did a video on the cocaine in the White House. You might check it out. I've got a little different take on that. I don't know how the cocaine got there. I'm sure they'll figure it out. But the problem that Joe Biden has is far worse than cocaine in the White House. The problem he has is it appears as though, according to James Comer, the chairman of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, they have the goods on him, showing that he's taken money for political activity, at least as vice president. And the more we learn about the operations of the Hunter Biden string of banks and LLCs that had money being basically washed through them, the more we learn about what happened, the more we learn about what the FBI actually knew and refused to prosecute, the more it's clear that Joe Biden is unfit for office, not because of his apparent inability from a mental standpoint, but because he may be a controlled entity of foreign interests. That's not acceptable. The impeachment isn't really started yet, although they've referred articles of impeachment. The investigations will continue, but the investigations to date, according to James Comer, the chairman of the committee, who's one of the committees that's heading it, that they have him dead to rights in terms of quid pro quo Joe. And there's more and more information they're getting. And the next couple of weeks, we're going to see a couple of the key actors in the Hunter Biden pay-for-play scheme, selling to international, to countries and to oligarchs around the world, access to Joe Biden. We're going to have two of the leaders of the Biden operation, Tony Bobulinski and Devin Archer, under deposition before the House committee, having to answer questions about what they knew and when they knew it, and more importantly, what Joe Biden knew and when Joe Biden knew it. So this is real developments going on there. So don't get impatient, but I do think it's important we continue to press for Congress to take this seriously and for impeachment, so they know that the public supports them in this attempt to get at the truth of whether or not Joe Biden is a compromised president. Let's see here. Michael Lisiski, thanks for joining us today, Mike. They're destroying America to get away with destroying America. Biden and Democrats, they got caught in a treasonous mess trying to use the impeachment process with lies to overthrow Trump's presidency, with a domestic attack on a sitting president, treason period. The average American can only hope and pray military steps in to protect their country and its citizens, not the criminals and critic government. Michael, I've become much more optimistic over the last week. I have to tell you, I am, first of all, the last thing I want is the military stepping up. I'm deathly afraid of what our military has become and who they'll point the guns at. So I prefer our military stay out of the streets if we can get there and keep there. But but when you look at this, right now, a lot of the pillars of the left are being ripped down. They're going nuts because of it. And sometimes in life, and I'm talking about this past June, where we were subjected to evil and crazy nonstop, and all the corporate embrace of evil and crazy. Sometimes the face of evil has to be exposed in order for people to actually believe it. People marching around naked in front of children at so-called pride festivals. They weren't called that then, but pride festivals will call that. In places like San Francisco was the norm for years and years. And when people say, wait a second, these people, look at what they're doing. People say, oh, that's just San Francisco. Well, now it's everywhere. And people are stunned that when activists chant, we're coming after your children, and somehow you're the crazy one because you don't think that drag queens should be reading books in children's story hour at your library, at your public library, that those things are wrong and have the very best are trying to attempt to groom children. It is you get down to it, people didn't believe that was actually occurring. And now they're faced with the absolute truth that it is. And it's hard to fight evil when you can't see it, and when people are deny that it exists. But when evil shows its face, it makes it far easier for people to come together and say no. And that's why we have people who are standing up and saying no at school boards and saying no to their local officials and their state officials is growing exponentially. And those who sit there and want to defend the grooming of our children, the transing of our children, those who want to defend that are on their heels because evil has been revealed. So I'm much more optimistic because I see things that are happening along those lines, and people's reaction. If people said, oh, I'd be scared to death, but they're not. People are being awakened. When people, when we have things like the pillar of the whole affirmative action, and that, somehow one group of people are incapable of being successful in a merit-based system, that tells, and that being wiped away, that is a great thing. And now what our job is to force the teachers unions and to force our school boards to start actually forcing there to be teaching and education in places like Baltimore, Maryland, in places like New York City, in places in urban areas around the country, to ensure that kids actually have a chance. Because those kids, when they're born, they have a chance. But if we don't have education systems that actually are safe and and where they can actually go and learn something, if we don't try to protect those education institutions or build private ones that people can go to and abandon the ones that are failed, we don't create an environment where people have opportunity, because regardless of color of skin or where they live, then that's on us. But the fact of the matter is, right now, the system that the left has controlled for decades and decades, the public school system in inner cities in Chicago and New York and Baltimore and elsewhere around the country, those public school systems that are failing to have kids come out with being able to even do near grade work by the time they get through 12th grade, if they get there, those aren't school systems. Those are nothing more than places that are harboring people who become desperate and destitute in the future because of the inability to access the opportunities, because quite honestly, the establishment got in the way. The left-wing establishment got in the way. We can break that left-wing establishment, because I believe people of all colors want opportunity. I think they want to have access to opportunity. And they want their children to have it. And the current system and our current school systems, public school systems, have failed, and they're failing on a massive level, and it is no longer is tolerable. So yeah, I think we have a chance to do great things. I think we have a chance to roll back a lot of the federal regulations that hamstring America in every single way, and because the Supreme Court has now said on a couple of occasions that the federal regulations that go beyond the scope of the actual law that's in statute are invalid. And now Congress can start ripping those things out by the roots and just saying, listen, we're not funding this, it's invalid, and we will not fund any defense of this regulation because we find it to be invalid under the Supreme Court. And so if somebody sues on those regulations to have them stripped away, the federal government won't be spending your tax dollars to keep regulations in place that are unconstitutional and destructive to our country. That is a great thing. We have an opportunity to win for the first time in my life. I think we have an opportunity to win on a wholesale basis and hit the reset button and truly make America great again. Let's see what else we have. And by the way, for all those people who hate Donald Trump, Trump judges. Trump judges. And when you think about how much you hate Mitch McConnell, I want you to understand something, folks. Mitch McConnell pushed a lot of those judges through. A lot of reasons people have to not like Mitch McConnell, and I understand every single one of them. But remember, when you get one of those rulings, remember Mitch McConnell is the guy who pushed those through. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to talk about this also, Michael. This is my last one of yours. I'm going to pick on because this is one of my real just irritants, and particularly it's one of my wife's irritants. The rainbow is a symbol that God will never flood the earth in its entirety again. It's a covenant between God and man, saying we are going to, and a promise that after society had gotten so far away from God that they no longer, that he was only able to find one man who still believed in the Creator and would follow the Creator and wasn't mocking the Creator. And the rainbow is the promise to Noah that will be, that there wouldn't be a similar event in the future. What we do know, and I can go through theology on it, but bottom line is stealing that symbol of and promise of God is a deliberate mocking of God, and the adoption of it is in some cases, unknowing adoption of it, is a mocking of God. And I'm not going to let him have the rainbow anymore. It was bad enough when Skittles took over the rainbow, let alone this garbage. So, but you're absolutely right, Michael. They did take a symbol and they turned it into a mocking of God, and when you look at what's going on, once again, evil reveals itself, and it has. I think cocaine that belonged to Mary. You can't. Michael. I had to use their one because of the Marion Barry. I actually, just personal thing. When I was a lobbyist for National Rifle Association many years ago, my parking space was in the parking lot of the hotel that Marion Barry got popped in with a cocaine, where he said the lovely lady who offered it to him, he used the famous term, bitch set me up. Well, I spent a lot of time in that hotel because I parked in that hotel, and all my colleagues parked in that hotel. So occasionally we'd stop and have a beer in the lounge of that hotel. So I was very familiar with the Vista Hotel, which isn't there anymore. It's something else now. I don't know what it's called. And I later on got a chance to work with Marion Barry on a project that he supported, and was attempting to build a educational / amusement area by RFK Stadium in DC, that the locals decided that they didn't want, because RFK was shut down at the time and there's basically dead space over there, but they didn't want traffic coming through their community, and so they killed a privately funded education island that was going to be built on basically dredge from the Anacostia River that formed an island. The island had nothing but trash and rats on it, no native species, since it was built by dredge. And as a result, we fought like crazy to try to get that done, and we ended up losing at the city council level. But I met Marion Barry because of that, and if ever it was a shock that a guy was in politics, Marion Barry was it, because he was so just quiet and almost meek in his approach to things, and he had the weakest handshake of any person I've ever met in politics. But but I did have a Marion Barry experience, so that's kind of, and both from the Vista Hotel, not at the Vista Hotel with him, but both the Vista Hotel experience and the other one. Anyway, with that, it's Friday. I just wanted to check in, and hopefully you learned something from this. If you think it was valuable, go ahead and share it. We have to take back our country. We have to take back our streets. We cannot lose our cities to these crazies who want to make it okay to drive out every business, drive out every job, and destroy entire neighborhoods by killing the ability of businesses to exist in those neighborhoods and in those communities. We have to uphold the law and hold people accountable for under the law. And the only way to do that is to start getting rid of these Soros prosecutors. And with that, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government.